Welcome to Breaking Banks.
Big things come in small packages. That sounds nice, but not even my 2-year-old is convinced. Sometimes, when we're dealing with big problems, we need big ideas, and we need them in big packages. Microfinance, as the name implies, can seem small. Fixing many of the environmental and social issues communities face is a local game. Well, financial technology is changing that game, and the impact can be felt around the world. In the first segment, I talk with Mary Ellen Iskenderian, Women World Banking's president and CEO, on how the WWB is partnering with Fintech to drive local change on a global basis. JP talks with Arnaud Auger from BNP Paribas, a global leader in sustainable finance, on the surprising connections between innovation and sustainability in the second half.
So, Mary Ellen, maybe the place to start, because for an organization with a global reach and a large impact, I don't know that many people really know the deep work that Women's World Bank actually does, right? It's kind of obvious when you put those things together to say, oh, I know what that is. And then you're like, but what are the specifics of that?
Thanks so much for asking, Jason. I used to say that, I hated being introduced as the world's best kept secret. So I'm glad we've kind of graduated from that place. But so we are a 42-year-old NGO. From our very start, we've worked globally, and our mission really has never changed. It's been about getting access to the full range of financial products and services, not just microloans, but savings, insurance, pensions, everything you and I need, payments, everything you and I need to conduct our financial lives to low-income women in developing countries. And I'd say for maybe like the first 25 years, that was tended to be more focused around microfinance institutions and supporting the leadership of those organizations as well as the end clients. But then about 15 years ago, when technology just sort of burst onto the scene, and it really seemed that anybody who had a supply chain or a supplier relationship in any way with that low-income woman, was kind of fair game to deliver her financial services. And so our partnerships just really expanded dramatically. So today we're working, fully. Of the 56 financial service providers that we work with in 34 countries, fully a third of them are fintechs. We have a couple of Pan-African banks working in multiple countries, both digitally and and non-digital financial services. Insurance companies, fast-moving consumer goods are turning out to be really strong partners in things like supplier credit. And wherever possible, we do it digitally. We do, through digital financial services, because that really is turning out to be the way last mile financial services are being delivered.
Well, and the last mile is so hard in this kind of micro and, broad reach that you have to do. I'd love to hear more about some of the fintechs that you've partnered with.
So, a slight plug here. A couple of years ago, we launched, in partnership with the Singapore Fintech Festival, a Fintech Innovation Challenge. And we explicitly started looking for fintechs that maybe it would be great if they had female founders, but we were really open to whomever the leadership was, as long as they were looking to deliver financial services, either for security, so savings, financial literacy, or outright prosperity, so digital lenders or insurance, insurance products. And so that first year, and Singapore was very gracious and gave us 2 slots that would go directly to the their Global Accelerator Day. And that first year, I think, was a perfect example of sort of the kinds of organizations that were attracted to us. One is a company working in several African countries called Pula, which is an insurtech. So they're providing agricultural insurance alongside, sort of embedded with agricultural inputs like fertilizer and seed, and taking advantage of that trusted relationship that many smallholder farmers, which in Africa is pretty much synonymous with women, and taking that trusted agent relationship, that extension agent, that agricultural dealer is really a trusted person, and making that connection with financial services as well, because that is so fundamental really to anybody forming a relationship with a financial service provider, but particularly women. Closing that trust gap is really, sort of job one. And we find that it can also be one of the biggest obstacles to full adoption of technology. The second winner that year was a company in Colombia called Aflore, which was kind of doing a kind of cool innovation on the microfinance model, in that they were working with, people that were trusted in the community. So not necessarily, loan officers, but people who could make good referrals to their neighbors, people in their vicinity who had businesses who wanted loans. But then they had a very sophisticated credit algorithm that they would run the referred credit through. If it came out well on their algorithm, the referrer would get a referral fee. If not, try again. We were very intrigued because we were seeing, while women referrers were making fewer references, they had a better track record in getting the loans approved.
Oh, interesting what the data can show. So I love the tech bent, right? We don't often think with, microfinance in an NGO being so tech driven. I'm curious on your thoughts broadly about the financial technology industry, because it's long promised this idea of, opening greater access and inclusion. Jennifer Tesh and I talk about this on the show all the time around, where is the promise and how do we deliver on it? Is fintech really delivering on this promise?
Well, I think, the way you could phrase it is, fintech may have kind of gotten lucky with this pandemic in a sense. I'd say technology has been technology and adoption usage has been a real silver lining for the pandemic. We saw 200 countries and territories around the world have some kind of COVID relief payment that was made through the government. The majority of them were digitally delivered, at least in part or in whole. Many of them were sort of a repurposing of a conditional cash transfer that was already targeting women. And so you had this, very real, very scary in a lot of cases, reason for a digitized payment going to women, but it just brought literally millions of people into the formal financial system. And it, to the extent that a country, say, like India, which only had women recipients that could receive the COVID cash transfer, you had in a couple of weeks, you had 25 million new bank accounts opened, largely by women, in order to take that digital payment. And so I think that now the challenge for financial technology is we've got them in the system. They saw the benefits of digital technology. Now let's keep them there. And so we've got to continue to give them services that make sense in their lives, that meet their needs. In Bangladesh, Cambodia, we worked with garment manufacturers, for example, who wanted to be responsible, made payments to their workers when they had to close or kind of go in and out of lockdown situations, immediately seeing huge value to a digital wallet. And so getting wallets onto the phones and into the hands of women workers, and making sure they understood how to use them and had the confidence to use that wallet. If they didn't have to immediately cash out, but keep that money in the digital ecosystem. So I think, we've had this real opening of the door for financial technology, and now it's time for the industry to meet this new tsunami of new clients that they've attracted.
Now, I'm curious, are you seeing them stay in the system, right? Was it a, temporal, blip that, necessity is the mother of invention, or in this case, the mother of adoption? is there enough value in the system that they're continuing to engage with it, that it's in some sense may have changed their trajectory?
So far, yes. And in most cases, we've even seen, there has been and remains a really persistent gender gap in ownership of smartphones. And that's particularly prevalent, say, throughout South Asia. You saw for the first time this last year that gender gap reduced. Now, it's still 15%. There's still 15% fewer women who have access to and ownership of an internet-enabled phone. But it was 25 2 years ago. So wow. You're really seeing the technology in women's hands. They're seeing real value. They're beginning to understand that there's an account underlying that phone. We had some great examples in Indonesia, for example, which was one of those countries that had a digitally delivered conditional cash transfer that it made primarily to women for their kids' healthcare and education, and had some, great outcomes with health and education. They literally overnight repurposed that to COVID relief and doubled up the payments. And we had women, coming to the sort of village ambassadors for the payment and saying, this is a lot of money. And my kids, the schools are closed. My kids aren't in school. Is there any way I can save this? Where can I save it? And they didn't necessarily understand that there was an account there underlying that payment that they could indeed save in. And so then that started raising questions like, oh, my husband knows about that account. I don't necessarily want him to know that I'm keeping money in it. Mm-hmm. But so that addresses really some of the issues when we think about women-centered design that you've got to design around if you want women to stay in the system and keep using the technology.
Yeah, that women-centered design has always been a tricky issue, both around access rights and saving and kind of traditional roles in some of these countries. I'm curious, how did that play out in terms of, did they actually put some more safety and controls around that in terms of access, or how have they been able to manage that?
So that's a great question. So again, so far, so good. And I've been, tremendously impressed both by, the financial regulators and the Ministry of Social Affairs, because, getting government agencies to play well together can often be the biggest challenge in these things. But they've recognized really what an opportunity this is to make massive changes, virtually overnight into keeping people, and women in particular, in the financial system. So, they have, they've been very responsive to things that we've suggested. I'd say the biggest thing where they kind of fell down on the job initially, and that was part of their engagement with us, was they didn't really do the best communication around the changes in the system. Again, when a woman says, okay, the schools are closed, and I don't want to take my kids to the doctor during COVID. This is what I'm supposed to be using the payment for. They didn't really explain very well. And I think, there's a lot of talk about financial and digital literacy, but it kind of needs to go both ways. The women are asking all the right questions, but they've got to be, met with good answers and good, clear explanations from the payment provider.
So, your enthusiasm for the opportunity, right? This moment that has taken place that we can build on. What excites you most about the future?
Well, I like to think about how disruptive fintech can be and likes to think it is. And, you hear a lot about, breaking things, and even the name of your podcast, Breaking Banks, is so great. But I really would love to see a challenge to the industry that disruption isn't just, disrupting the status quo, the people who are currently getting access to services, just getting access to them through technology, perhaps a little bit faster or a little bit cheaper, but really being more expansive in the way we think about who gets access, who gets to come in, who gets included. If you think about the woman we had for the first time with this year's FinTech Challenge, we gave an award to female founders because that's another area where there's been very little disruption from the legacy banking system in terms of the gender composition of boards and of it's such a founder-driven industry, and you're seeing so few women founders. So we really wanted to celebrate the fact that 75% of the applicants to our challenge were women. And the organization that won, Ada Impacto, has done a credit algorithm, alternative credit scoring off of WhatsApp data. And I really felt like they put it so well when they said, the fintechs in Mexico, and Mexico has a fantastic fintech regime and has adopted, a lot of, great regulatory practices, one of the earliest emerging market sandboxes. But they're just fighting over the same, few million clients that are already included. Let's think about expanding who gets to play.
So how do we do that though, right? Like part of it was the absence of the phone. I can't believe the number was so high that the tech gap was 25%. And it's great that that's been closed, but what other structural issues do we need to be addressing here?
Well, I think a lot of it is just kind of looking internally. This is an industry based on data that runs on data. This is the first time that a lot of these people are even showing up as, data worthy clients. And there's a lot of information about how they use products, where they use products, their frequency. And so there's some stunning information more on the banks than on fintechs about the number of organizations. It was a study a couple of years ago from the Inter-American Development Banks, 110 Latin American banks that only less than 4% of them, so like 4 banks, were even gender disaggregating the data that they were collecting. We're even looking at, how are men using their accounts versus the way women were using their accounts. And the ones that did kind of sheepishly told the researchers, yeah, we collect the data, but we don't really use it in our decision making. And I think that could be such a brilliant area for disruption by fintechs. Use the data that you're collecting, see how it might be different in terms of usage patterns, and then just go for it. Build products around that data set around women.
I would guess that in the US, the situation is actually probably no different, that I think very few banks actually, one, think through even looking at how some of the usage data, plays out, but also this fear of, will it be regarded as discriminatory, keeps us from actually taking beneficial actions, against it, right?
Right. No, and that was a huge issue, and rightfully so. That you didn't want to be, discriminating. Oh, this is a woman, so we'll give her, discriminatory terms. But in terms of, I always wondered about that because the insurance industry always provided, different products, different terms based on, good actuarial data. So there is a precedent for the financial services industry to look at men and women differently and design products as they need them, as their life experience indicates.
Well, as we come to the end here, I want to close with one of the most exciting things that's going to be happening in 2022. You have a book coming out. There's nothing micro about 1 billion women making finance work for women. Talk to me about the book.
Oh my goodness, this is so exciting. Nobody asks about the book. So this is wonderful. I'm still getting used to being an author. So yeah, I like to think the title says it all. If there were a market of 1 billion people that is completely locked out of a service, I would think you'd have a mad dash to figure out how that service could be, how that market could be tapped. And somehow low-income women just don't get that same treatment. And so the book really is making the case for how it's very good business, how it's really good for inclusive economic growth. And every time the IMF comes out, they seem to have, gloomier and gloomier predictions for world growth. So if you're leaving, trillions of dollars of economic growth on the table, that just seems so short-sighted, excuse me. But then it's really very good for women as well in terms of their health benefits, the benefits for their families, their communities.
Fantastic. And we'll have to have you back when the book is published, get you on your first speaking tour. If you look at kind of this huge opportunity that's presented, if a bank or a fintech founder wants to get involved with the movement and providing services, that mad dash, someone wants to join the dash, how do you suggest they get started? What can you provide? What sources do you go to help accelerate this pace of change?
Well, if you're working in the emerging markets, please do come to womensworldbanking.org. I mean, have from our earliest inception, we work directly with the financial service provider to help them reach that client. We've got people who can help you with product design, who can help you with marketing, who can help you with diversity in your leadership team and your board. And now in the last 8-9 years, we've actually also been an investor. So if you are looking for a capital round that wants to see women-centered products as a new source of revenue, Women's World Banking is there as an investor and would be delighted to join you.
What are your investment themes? With CJs Group, what do they focus on, and what is the size of the round? And do you have to be in an emerging market, or can it be elsewhere?
Well, the current fund that our mutual friend is running is a global fund, but with a particular focus in emerging markets. We're looking at financial service providers, but not just microfinance institutions. Our first fund was pretty microfinance centric. This fund is really looking much more broadly at not only different types of services, so say insurance or an insurance technology company, but also other types of products. So our first investment, for example, was an affordable housing company in India that requires the woman's name to be on the title to the property that's being financed. And that asset ownership piece is so important to women's economic empowerment. And we just thought it was such a brilliant idea. There's some really very clever investors that had done the Series A. So we came into Series B and are now doing a third round of financing. Our average investment size in this fund has actually been pretty small because we want to be around to continue for future rounds. We just made our single largest investment, $10 million in a fascinating P2P platform in Indonesia that's taking funds from sort of middle class, wealthier Indonesians, and then making microloans to poor women in some of the outer islands in Indonesia. Average loan size $200. They take all the loan risk based on their credit scoring algorithm, and then the donor, I guess, or the lender receives a fixed return.
Oh, interesting. So it's back to some of the earliest days of marketplace lending, but with a ESG kind of twist attached to it, right? Right.
Good way
Fantastic.
of
putting it. Yeah. What other sorts of things, if people are interested in pursuing investment, how do they get a hold of Women's World Banking?
Well, as I said, that the website is womensworldbanking.org, and just there's a CEO, right to the CEO. I'd be delighted to take inquiries. It's been such a revelation for us how much impact we can have as an investor. We do a lot of work not only on gender diversity within the organization, but then helping that organization perhaps reach those women clients that they didn't realize were out there, or that they maybe didn't have the right product for. So we're a very active investor, not only in trying to get you to do things around the board table, but also helping you really drive additional revenue by having that women's focus in your business.
Well, one of the things I love best about this is it's not being treated as the touchy-feely, oh, we should go solve this problem, from a philosophical or a moral, but it actually really is good business. And you guys think about it and talk about it like an investor.
Yeah. No, we've now long ago realized that if, we're grant funded on the NGO side, not on the investment side, that's all, real other people's money, and they expect it back with a market rate return. But on the NGO side, we're grant funded, but we just learned long ago, if an organization does something just because we're providing the grant funding to do it, and it's not commercially viable, then as soon as we leave, the product leaves as well. So we do a customer lifetime value calculation on every product that we deliver, and we will stay there on our own dime if we have to, until we make sure that that's a positive number for you going forward. And we're just seeing, again, with the digital services, CLVs are higher for women than for men, as long as you get that product mix right.
Well, I love how you talk about it, because unfortunately the nonprofit world is one of the most inefficient marketplaces, right? There, where you can continue to have someone make a grant far after it's the utility it has been found. So love that you talk like a tech entrepreneur and how you do it. So thank you so much for joining us, Mary Ellen. Really excited to read the book when it comes out in March.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, Jason. Thank you.
I'm here now with Arnaud Auger from BNP Paribas, who is giving a talk here at Money 2020. What's the name of your talk, Arnaud?
So I'll talk about fintech for climate change and how to empower our clients on this challenge.
Well, and as deputy head of the Innovation Lab in San Francisco, you spend a lot of time thinking about environmental and social and governance, and climate change is some of that. What does that have to do with fintech? Tell us a little bit, give us a preview of your talk.
Yeah, so as an innovation lab of a bank, so innovation lab of BNP Paribas, which is the largest bank in European Union and world fifth largest bank by revenue, we are here to make the connection, the bridge, basically in San Francisco between the fintech and the bank, right? And so BNP Paribas is also the world leader in sustainable finance. And we do that mostly with all our investment banking activities, with all the green bonds. We are the world's second provider of green bonds. But then, yes.
Can you define what is a green bond? Exactly?
A green bond, it's a financial tool that lets companies to get this financing, but attached with a specific green aspect on what the asset will be deployed. Yeah. But that's true. That my area of expertise is more on personal finance, and so I was curious to see if indeed fintech could help us as a bank to empower our retail clients and even commercial banking clients on this journey towards sustainable finance. And so, yes, I study with the rest of the team back in 2017 on all the fintechs that could be related with something to do with the climate. Okay, and we identified several players, obviously a lot in robo-advising, but also even in lending, in daily banking, etc. And this is how we started to initiate partnerships for BNP Paribas with these fintech.
So what's an example of somebody you partner with? What do they do, and how do we make that green? How do we help climate change through fintech?
Yeah, so the first partnership we have initiated is with OpenInvest, which is a robo-advisor that now has been actually acquired by Chase. But it's a robo-advisor that lets you align your investment portfolio with your values. So if you don't want to invest with any companies, anything to do with the deforestation or any cause that you don't like, with OpenInvest, you can do it. And it's true that it was tricky situations that we as a bank, we don't invest in coal, we don't invest in tobacco and things like that. But we don't finance anymore these activities. But then if you are a wealth management client and you want to have your portfolio, we didn't have so much of these capacities. So we partnered with OpenInvest to let customers do so. And it's true that, think about it, if you think you're like a good person for the planet, you drive a Tesla, you are vegan, and actually all your 401k is actually financing everything you ate, that's kind of absurd. So we try to also make sure that you can be consistent with your finance, with your values.
So how about beyond just putting your investment dollars in more sustainable places. What else can fintech do to help improve climate change?
Yeah, so actually we also find like fintechs that can also, based on your transactions, measure the carbon footprint of your transactions. So to really show where you can have an impact, And so we partnered with a company called Greenly in France, and we even invested in another one called D'Economy to do exactly that, to have this capacity to estimate the carbon footprint of every of the transactions. And today, if you're a BNP Paribas customer in France, or if you are a Bank of the West customer in the US, you can have this carbon tracker directly within your daily banking app. And in France, we even have the capacity to give you tips to reduce your carbon footprint. Even with another fintech that we partnered with, Climate Seed, you can offset your footprint. So basically, really to align not only your investment, but your everyday purchases with what could be good for the planet.
Well, and how are customers reacting to this? What's uptake been like?
Yeah, I think there's a good momentum, and actually even Bank of the West made a whole campaign about that, and we created even a checking account with 1% for the planet. So 1% of the revenue that the bank makes on this checking account goes to 1% for the planet that finance environmental non-profit organizations. And yes, we made this big statement, and I think there's the momentum is there, and we saw that even sustainable investing grows significantly over the past 3 years. I think it grew by 40% from like $12 trillion to $17 trillion today, and like a third of like total assets under management are today with sustainable and impact investing. And even if you ask Americans, there was a survey about that, like 85% of Americans are actually interested in sustainable finance. But if you ask millennials, so younger people, like 95%. And so basically, yes, we made a big campaign of awareness to show that, yes, actually, where you put your money matters for the planet, and you can also have an impact. And I think that's a big differentiator because I think more and more people, they want to do well by doing good, and they realize they can do so. And so, yeah, that's our competitive advantage, I think. And yes, like you ask, I think the popular momentum is there.
Well, how about outside of climate change? What other areas of ESG are you focused on as you're looking at innovative approaches?
So I'm personally passionate about financial inclusion. So in ESG, you have environmental, but you also have social. And I think that like any sustainable move for the planet, if it's not financially affordable, if it's not accessible like socially for the population, that's still not sustainable. So that's really another area of challenge is to work on that, and how a bank can be a partner for your financial health. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done about financial education, to improve the financial literacy of people, to also use fintech to basically drive people to understand their finance, to know where they actually spend money on, what they could do. And historically, it's true that financial planning was a monopoly of wealth managers. It's only if you have a lot of wealth that you can have someone to advise you on your money. And also money being a taboo topic, you don't really talk about it with your friends. And so I think, yeah, that's why, I mean, I think 2/3 of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And if you're in the number one economy in the world, I mean, there's a problem there. And I think it's less a problem of resources than to let people know how to better manage these resources.
Well, certainly agree with that. It's something we've talked about a lot on the show. So what's an example of something you're doing around that?
Yeah, so that's something we're still working to develop even more in the future. But yes, I think all of these that we try to integrate is all of the tips within directly the banking app. So I think the way you can improve financial wellness or financial health is both with financial education and with financial automation. So eventually, to let people automatically save and to all of these tools in place. So this is where we build the things. And it's also interesting that culturally, if your listeners are interested to that, financial literacy is less a topic in Europe than it is in the US, because in Europe, especially in France or Belgium, where we are strong, there's a welfare state, and so education is kind of free, healthcare is kind of free, and retirement is taken care by the government. So you have less things to do, and financial services are less sophisticated.
Right.
But that's why it's something also. I hope from San Francisco, this is something we can say, because still, anyway, French people, European people need financial literacy and education, and so that's something we can also kind of import thanks to the big trend that we see. And I was very happily impressed that at the welcome talk of Money 2020, the director of Money 2020 say that, financial inclusion is the main topic. Magic Johnson also, we might need that. So I think, maybe this year, this is a topic of the year, like financial inclusion and more broadly, sustainable finance.
Right. Well, besides giving your talk, what else brings you here to Money 2020? What are you looking for? What have you seen that's been interesting for you?
Yeah, so again, my job is to meet the fintech, to know what are the financial innovations on the market, and to see if we can integrate that. So we can actually work with fintech on three ways. We can do commercial partnerships, like we did with Open Invest, for instance. We can do investment. We have actually historically invested in Chime, for instance, and we can even acquire fintech. For instance, in France, we acquired the largest neobanks. It's called Nicols, and it's actually a neobank for the underbanked, so for underserved population. And it's very interesting to see that actually that the largest neobank in the US is Chime, and the largest neobank in France is Nicols, with also 2 million customers, and both are on these underserved market, underbanked and non-prime customer, but to help them alleviate their finance on the journey. So my role is to know what's possible and to see if we can actually integrate these fintechs. Because basically, sometimes the business units, that come to us as an innovation lab with a problem and ask us if we know a solution. But sometimes we know great fintech solution, and like we did for climate, we approach the businesses and we say, okay, maybe you can be interested into that, and then this is how we do business. Yeah.
Find any new potential partners while you've been here?
I'm working on it. Yeah, but it's also interesting to see the other talk and to see also like other banking peers, and I've been on the talk. But again, I was very happily impressed that many talks were around this topic of financial inclusion and sustainable finance. So it means that we're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, what did I not ask you you'd hoped we could talk about today?
No, I think that's already a lot of good topics. But I'm excited also to listen to the other episodes that you will have, and that's why when I'll be flying back to San Francisco or while running in San Francisco street, I could listen to your podcast and the rest of the show and make an extension of Money 2020.
Maybe pick up a few things you didn't hear.
Exactly.
So Arnaud, thank you and merci.
Merci beaucoup
for joining us on the show today.
That's it for this week. If you like the show, make sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, or share it with a friend, or share it on social media.
We'll see you again next week with more Breaking Banks.